Hey guys, we're group 5 and we're doing a presentation on the California Assembly Bill 1639 of 2019. The problem is e-cigarettes, also known as vapes, are vessels that contain various products such as cannabis, tobacco, and nicotine. The first vape was created in Beijing, China for its smoke-like effects and to help people with smoking addictions to reduce their intake and eventually stop smoking. However, in the recent years, many adolescents have come across vaping as a trend. In November 2018, FDA released that the use of vaping products among high school students has increased by 78% compared to 2017. This chart shows that the e-cigarette use has increased more than the traditional cigarette use in the recent years. As of 2018, 3 million high school students use e-cigarettes in the US. In California, 3% of the adults used e-cigarettes in 2017. In 2019, 18.2% high school students used vapes. In 2014, the use of vapes was 24.4% among 400K middle school and high school students, which of 13.4% never smoked before in California, meaning that vapes induce smoking among people who have never smoked before. Our main focus is cannabis vapes. The use of marijuana and vaping products has increased among college students aged from 19 to 22 years old in the past few years, from 5.2% in 2014 to 14% in 2019. This accounts for the largest increase in the last 45 years. The FDA and the CDC both have discovered that the THC from the marijuana plant is associated with EVALI of lung injuries due to vaping, among other health issues. Vitamin E acetate found in vapes is also linked to lung injuries. A study done in New Zealand found that smoking cannabis increased the risk of lung cancer by 8% every year they smoked. Studies have also shown that vaping increased the risk of cognitive dissonance. Our policy, California Assembly Bill of 639 of 2019, restricts how cannabis vapes and products are being sold and also how they are being made. It helps limit the artificial flavoring found in the vapes and other marijuana and tobacco products. In February 2019, the bill was introduced by Gray, Rivas, Flora, Kamlager, and Ting. August 12th, the bill was passed in committee and to Committee on Health. August 20th, the bill was passed in committee and re-referred to Committee on Appropriations. August 30th, committee passes it. September 9th, the bill is reread a third time, and as of November 30th, 2020, there has been no further Senate action. The bill accounts for the state of California, is a standalone policy, but has related policies such as AB Bill 739, SB 38, SB 39, and SB 538, all of which discuss the selling of cannabis, tobacco, and other smoking products. The bill is being set for enactment potentially in the future.
So the policy landscape includes previous policies such as the Stop Tobacco Access to Kids Enforcement Act and the California Cigarette and Tobacco Products Licensing Act of 2003 that were both enacted at the state level. The Control, Regulate, and Tax Adult Use of Marijuana Act was enacted at the state level as well and is known as Proposition 64 in 2016, which regulated the cultivation, distribution, storage, manufacturing, sale, and use of cannabis for non-medical purposes by people 21 years of age and older. The Medicinal and Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act was also at the state level and established a uniform licensing regime for both medical and adult use cannabis in January of 2018. The Preventing Online Sales of E-Cigarette to Children Act was enacted at the federal level and was passed in the Senate and revised the requirements regarding the sale and delivery of electronic nicotine delivery systems. And even though most of these acts were directed towards nicotine products, cannabis business owners were warned that these laws may apply to them as well in the near future. And this assembly bill would try to amend these acts as well as create small changes to prohibit the sale and distribution of artificially flavored cannabis vape products. And those in support of this assembly bill include the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, the American Heart Association, the American Lung Association in California, and the Campaign for Tobacco Free Kids in order to keep tobacco products out of the hands of youth. And those in opposition include the Vapor Technology Association, who argue that this bill would result in years of litigation and regulatory debates in order to fully define its parameters.
For the logic model, a couple of the inputs mentioned were funding to pay health inspectors, funding regulators for cannabis retail sites. Activities could include things such as propose conducting on site inspections at retail sites to ensure no violations, as well as initiating the ban of cannabis with artificial flavoring within vape products. In terms of participation, youth to early adulthood, more specifically, health inspectors and regulators, as well as low income, those who have poor access to healthcare or information. For short term, a couple of mentionings were increased awareness of policy of targeted populations, increased participation in self management, such as self control while using vapes, or restricting the selling of artificial cannabis flavored vapes. Intermediate outcomes could include younger in population that would slowly stop buying the cannabis flavored artificial flavored vapes, and increased dependence and increased health behavior. And then long term, improve potential lung health related measures and reduced amount of lung injuries, just to name a few. And then for our evaluation questions, the first question we have is, were participants who use artificial flavored cannabis vapes aware of the policy? So this policy did not come to effect until 2019, 2020. So years before, people weren't aware. However, the most involvement was in 2020, where the Committee of Health brought it to light to the states if they wanted to include this policy, but further action is needed by the states itself to bring attention to it for youth populations to discourage the use of artificially flavored cannabis vapes. And then for our second question, how will behavior change between younger consumers and retailers once restrictions of artificially flavored vapes occur? So based on the policy implementation, the behavior change would most likely be that the youth consumers are less inclined to visit these vape slash smoke shop retailers once the flavored vapes are banned, because with more regulating, the population would not want to deal with risks of being caught and be more dependent on artificial cannabis flavored vapes. For the last question, would there be a reduced prevalence in lung injuries caused by artificial cannabis flavored vapes? After the policy implementation, there would be a decrease in prevalence caused by these artificial vapes, because the youth populations would have to be more dependent on these products or less dependent on these products, which would make them gradually not use them anymore. Hence, it would lead to less exposure to chemicals such as formaldehyde that could potentially harm the lungs in the long term. For evaluation design, the health outcome we're focusing on is, would there be reduced prevalence in lung injuries caused by artificial cannabis flavored vapes? The chosen design we chose was the time series design, mostly because you would be studying the effects after the policy is implemented, specifically between two cities, youth population groups, since it's a policy based in California that would be measuring intervals over time.
The data needed for our study is the sales statistics among artificial flavored cannabis vapes, which can help with data because the amount of sales from the beginning of the study to the end of the study can tell us if there was a reduction of usage. We also need the number of youth using vaporized artificial flavored cannabis before and after the study, dependent on cities being studied. And lastly, we need comparison groups between two major cities in California, such as San Francisco and Los Angeles, to look at the influences from low-income neighborhoods surrounded by smoke shops compared to other cities.
So the time frame we decided on was about 25 to 30 years in order to get accurate data on what long-term effects the study or policy has on youth involved. We also decided on a time series design, which would allow us to collect data from sales over time intervals to see differences in artificially flavored versus naturally flavored cannabis vapes, as well as follow-ups from participants.
For the economic evaluation, we decided to use the CUA model. This perspective will be a government perspective, as we will need to fund the DPH to conduct the inspection, which leads us to the cost of the policy. They are mainly going to be direct costs, such as money for health inspector labor, transportation, and analysts needed to crunch any data. Information needed to evaluate the policy will be the utility value for lung cancer, value for life saved years, cost of policy, and quality. And to calculate the quality, we take the length of life saved in years multiplied by the utility value, and that gives you your quality. And to calculate the unit of effectiveness, you take the total cost of policy, which in our case is 1.4 million, divide that by the quality generated in the equation above, and that would get you your cost per quality.
So the evaluation challenges include a time lag in data collection. So since 25 to 30 years is a long time for a study, it may cause some participants to fall out, which would lead to a loss of data on the health effects we decided to focus on, which was lung cancer. So that means follow-up would have to be consistent and effective. Another challenge is consistent vape use. So it'd be unethical to impose smoking vape products on a group of teens or youth and would require consistent use of vaping from both the experimental and control groups for accurate results and data collection. Outside factors are also challenges as well. So this includes economic factors. So with the rise in vape product prices, would some of the participants still continue their use of vape products, and this would affect the validity of the study? Public awareness also plays a role. So, with more studies of the negative health effects caused by vapes, would participants still continue to use vape products? And fallout or attrition is another challenge. So, this occurs when participants leave during a study, and it almost always happens to some extent, which makes it inevitable. So, we would need a big enough study population to eliminate these outside factors.
Possible health disparities can arise based on youth groups chosen dependent by city. For example, if the cities chosen were San Francisco and Los Angeles, San Francisco would have more areas exposed to smoke shops, creating more health problems for these populations. Other possible health disparities could arise from retailer sites that go uninspected, remembering that this policy calls for inspections on around 20% of the retailers in California. If the retailers fail to abide, the young people around them could continue to have access, as well as the young people around those uninspected retailer sites could continue to have access to vaping products as well. Possible uninspected consequences could arise when young people look for these products elsewhere. That is to say that young people could turn to aftermarket or street market, where these vaping products often go unregulated or contain unknown or even more harmful additives. And then our question for the class is, would focusing on retailer sales or manufacturer production be more effective when trying to regulate potentially harmful cannabis products